Welcome to Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching, the podcast that builds on conventional wisdom and adds a fresh perspective on this ever-evolving field of coaching.
Are you fed up with advice that doesn't really get to the heart of the matter or really get you?
Whether you're a reluctant or seasoned leader, this podcast is for you.
Embark on a journey of actionable insights, harness untapped potential, and learn to develop a mindset that will transform you permanently.
Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching, where we shatter boundaries and awaken the confident and compassionate leader within.
Hello again, Marty. This is part 2 of The Life of a Coach.
Welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah. We had an opportunity to chat a little bit. We took a few minutes and just reminded ourselves of the things that we talked about in part 1. And now we said right at the end of that episode, we're out of time. Let's make sure we talk about this again. Since then, we've recorded, I think, 3 or 4 different episodes.
Yeah. So we're back to this topic now.
Because we were excited about those things. And now we're back to this topic. Yeah. So the things, let's go ahead and just name the things that we thought we might talk about in this episode. One of them is building the business. There's a lot to talk about there and how that impacts our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Training.
The training that we get, or as coaches too, which costs money, takes time, and gives us a very different perspective than a lot of people. So that's an important part of being a coach. I think some people have the impression you could just hang a shingle out saying, "Hey, I'm a coach," and people will pay you, but it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. We have to be sharpening our skills constantly.
And it's great. I love the training. So
yes.
Another thing that we talked about is like, what's the life of a coach with regard to relationships, like having a personal life too. So yep. How is that different from other professions?
I'm thinking right now about the name of our podcast, Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching. That's what it is, Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching. And what's atypical even about this conversation is that we're talking about ourselves as coaches and the interaction that people typically have, I believe, with coaches is with coach as coach and with the other individual as client or potential client.
Mm-hmm.
And in this episode, at least, and I think we do this probably quite a bit in our conversations, we just share from our hearts and from our own experience without concern for roles and identity. I believe, at least that's my intention, just to show up authentically and tell the truth about who I am and what's going on with me.
Same here, but I wouldn't be naive with myself enough to say, oh, I'm always outside of roles. I think I slip into roles very easily.
It is easy to do and probably necessary too.
Sure.
Very necessary to step into that role. If I'm imagining a professor in a college course that would just come in and sit down in the front row with the rest of the students, and everybody's going to wonder who's leading.
Right. I did that once.
Did you?
Yeah, when I taught, there was a freshman required course for all freshmen at Villanova. I was in the philosophy department, and so the philosophy professors got to teach these sort of more philosophical, required liberal arts sort of basic background courses that all students have to take. And that's what I did one time. I walked in, I just sat amongst them, and I just waited to see what would happen. It was really interesting.
But what did happen?
Just to make a long story short, somebody knew better. One of the kids said, "Aren't you the teacher?" I got found out.
That sounds like fun. Sounds like something I'd want to do.
But that brings up another topic that we thought we might cover in this under this umbrella today, which is, because that was my life before being a coach. How is that different from my life as a coach? And I'm sure you got more to tell in that, because you've had several different kinds. You're an expert in a lot of things.
I don't know. I've had a lot of experiences in a lot of different areas. I don't know about expert though.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's just start there and we'll work backwards through that list. The things that I did before becoming a coach, and even after becoming a coach, I was a mortgage loan officer, and I did that for 16 years. And I was responsible for generating, I didn't get paid for very long if I didn't produce business, meaning if I didn't find people that wanted to borrow money to buy their homes, whether it was a refinance or a purchase. And my employers all legally had to pay me something, minimum wage typically, but they couldn't afford to continue to pay me even minimum wage and provide me with an office space and equipment if I didn't produce something. So that means pressure to go develop relationships with real estate agents and other potential referral sources, making sure I was getting the word out constantly to people, and that I was in the business of loaning money so that they could buy a home or refinance it. And especially at first, when I first started in that business, I felt very self-conscious for a couple of reasons. One, because I didn't know anything about the mortgage business. And not unlike many industries, the training for the mortgage business essentially consisted of, after I'd done all the licensing and studied and passed all the tests in order to get licensed, what it consisted of, there's a telephone, there's a desk over there, start calling. Or go jump in your car and go stand next to a real estate agent until they get you a loan.
Right.
So that was the training. So that was one thing that I was really uncomfortable with, not knowing what I was doing and not knowing how to go about getting the business. But then actually even understanding the loan business, and then overcoming my own inner fear about asking someone to trust me with a transaction when I, especially at first, knew nothing about it, and hoped that someone, once I got a loan, would show me what to do and how to do it so I didn't mess things up for somebody. It was a scary thing, and I had a lot of internal conflict around it. And then even after I began to understand it and made myself an expert in the field, I still had a lot of reluctance about going out and asking for the business. And in that way, things haven't changed, honestly, that much between being a coach, where I need to go out and get the business and make sure people know that I do what I do. I try to find a lot of indirect and passive ways to do that, rather than going directly to talking with people, which is ironic because I love talking to people. And yet I've got parts in me that are scared about reaching out and saying, hey, by the way, I'm a coach, I can help. So in that way, the things are similar. But even in that area, what's different is that I know where to go to get support when that scared part of me says, yes, but they're going to reject me, but they're not going to recognize my value, or they're going to see that I'm an imposter or something like that.
Yeah, I think that sometimes it's been put to me, you eat what you kill.
Yeah.
As a salesperson and as somebody whose income is based on, say, commissions, right, on sales. That's a very different world.
Oh my.
From a number of people. There are a number of professions where that's true, but it's very different to just know that if you show up and you go to the office, you do your job, you're going to get paid. It's a different thing to know that if I don't close a sale, I'm not going to have dinner tonight, right? That is a very different world.
Dramatically. And I can remember when I was in the grocery business, which I also spent 21 years at, I got paid every other Friday. I had a pretty good idea what my paycheck was going to be, unless I happened to get some overtime in, which is really a bad word in the grocery business. Nobody works overtime. Nobody gets paid overtime. Or salary, knowing what that fixed amount was going to be. And like you say, as long as I showed up and did my job reasonably well, I could count on getting that paycheck and getting the benefits, health insurance, and everything that's involved in the security of employment. But beginning in, I think it was 1993 that I had to pay. Excuse me, I'm going to go back even further than that. 1985, I was trying to get out of the grocery business, and I took my first sales job as a car salesman. And oh my, the orientation was very painful. Yes, I did it for 2 years. And there was not, other than the times that I actually got paid, those were the best times in the car business. Every aspect of the rest of it was the worst times. It challenged my integrity and my values, and I really hated it. But that's how desperate I was to get out of the grocery business.
Yeah.
At that time. And it taught me a lot. It taught me an awful lot about just what you're saying. How do I operate in life when I'm under this kind of pressure and have this much fear and feel this compromised, and I'm expected to go out and show up and be someone who I'm not?
And I think it's heightened in the life of a coach. That is heightened because on the one hand, you have to make the money happen. You have to get clients. You have to kill what you're going to eat. And at the same time, the content of the work has nothing to do with you. It's all about them. Yeah. It's all about the client. So on the one hand, you're trying to get them into your book of business so that you can pay your bills. And on the other hand, you got to make it all about them. I think it's a really interesting conundrum for a coach.
It is. And I'll just say this, that probably 80 to 90% of the time that I've been a coach, which is about 13 years now, I haven't been concerned at a level of fear. I haven't had a fear around getting enough business.
Uh-huh.
I've had enough business. The first 5 years that I was in the business, I was still in the mortgage business too, so I did both.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, my boss, when he found out that I was working as a life coach, that I had this side gig being a life coach, he said, "Oh, I'm going to pretend like I didn't hear that, because if I knew that, I'd have to fire you. And I don't want to have to fire you. So you're going to have to keep it quiet." There's a huge dilemma there. When nobody knows that you're a life coach, nobody hires you. So how do you keep it quiet and have success at the same time? And so I did. I was able to find clients who had nothing to do with the mortgage business, who were interested in my services and that were willing to pay me. And when I reached enough of an income from that, then I dropped the mortgage business, which was the end of 2015, and went full time into coaching. And really, there's only been a few times when I've been worried or concerned about money since then. There's been a steady flow of referrals and regular business. And I've loved it so much that I'm out there and in here doing everything that I can that's related to coaching, like building content, putting out newsletters, doing social media marketing that conveys the philosophies and the ideas and the passion that I have about coaching. And that's been enough to earn me the business and connect me with the kind of people who recognize the need for my services and can afford to pay me. But we could call it a game, and many times I view it as that. It's a game. It's a much different game to go out and generate, to be in business for yourself, to watch your expenses, to make sure you generate enough revenue. Mm-hmm. And to keep my head in the game, to keep my mindset right. I need coaching around how to be a business owner.
Sure. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And I get that partially from you. I get that from my coach, Carlos. I get that from my fellow practitioners in the IFS model. And I get it both on a scheduled and regular basis, as well as on demand as I need it.
Shall we look at the next question?
You haven't commented much about the difference for you, the difference when you were in school and being a professor and being a coach. What changed for you?
Learning to kill what I eat. That's such an ugly phrase that I keep using.
It is. Let's think of a different one. Every time you say that, I think, I don't want to kill anything or anybody. And I certainly wouldn't want to eat it if I killed it.
But there's also something to be savored about. Like, it is a rubber meets the road, no messing with this equation. Like, you do have to make business happen. You don't. So I don't mind using such an ugly phrase just to bring back the raw factuality about it. For me, it changed a lot because I was an academic before. I had small jobs, but my main job was to be thinking and researching and teaching, grading papers and all that all the time. And so it's one thing that's very different for me is that was all like in the mind and in time. And I had to learn to be here now. That was not my practice. That wasn't how I was living before I became a coach. And even just like I had a tendency at first to want to prepare for each coaching call, and it didn't help. Maybe a little bit sometimes, but mostly what I needed was to be in that same present moment with the client, hearing what's really going on. So that was and then when the coaching call's over, I could go ride my bike. I didn't have to go study some more. Like when you're an academic, there's no end to all the books you're supposed to have read and all the articles you're supposed to have written. It never stops. You do it 24/7, even in your sleep. And I don't do coaching in my sleep. I sleep in my sleep.
Yeah. Interesting point. That me too. Me too. Yes. And I used to worry about, was that loan going to close, and was their appraisal going to come in, and how is this buyer going to respond to the fact that the seller wasn't willing to address that mold issue? I did that instead of sleeping at night.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was refreshing. Wow. The day is done. I could go think about something totally different now. I don't have to keep thinking about work.
In fact, the fact that you trained yourself, you made that adjustment. And as you mentioned it, I recognize that I had to do that. I have to do that as well. If I'm going to be an effective coach, I need to be present in the moment with the client right here, right now. As soon as I move away from that, whether that's to grab a piece of content or curriculum that I've created and bring my agenda into the session, that begins to overlap the client's agenda, and I can no longer be an effective coach, because now I'm asking them to come over where I'm at instead of meeting them where they're at. And that training actually has bled over into my relationships in my personal life outside of coaching sessions.
I'm sure.
I have come to treasure being in relationship with people who can actually be present and who have the ability to actually listen in order to hear, rather than listen for me to take an inhale so that they can talk.
Right.
And vice versa. As I've learned to offer that to people, to really be present, to be able to listen, to hear, to understand, rather than listening so that I can find my opportunity to make my point and show you how brilliant I am.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I had a session with another person who coaches me. Gosh, I get a lot of coaching, which is great, yesterday. And afterwards, I realized that mostly what she did for me was to really hear what I was going through my brain and my emotions and everything. And once she did that, I knew the steps to take afterwards. We didn't really have to discuss that, but the service that she provided was being present with me.
Yeah, power. It's so rare that can happen. So needed. We all need that so badly. And when we don't get that, we leave it to, this is my theory about this, so I don't need to be right about it, but consider this, that if we don't get external validation, not in the way of, not like you're right and they're wrong validation, but validation that this other person has heard me, they understand me, they really get me. If we don't get that out there, we have to provide it in here. And if we are mentally healthy enough, if we are mentally and emotionally healthy enough, we can provide that for ourselves. But if we're not conscious about doing that, then what happens is the young parts of myself that still are unhealed and that are concerned about how scary it is to have an adult life with a coaching business and a practice and a relationship with a full-grown woman. Those young parts of me get scared and get overtaken by that, and there's nobody listening inside. They're all screaming.
Right.
And so it's so valuable to be, I don't know who I am if I am not in relationship with another. And the quality of that relationship determines how I occur to myself.
You never have been other than in relationship with others. So it makes sense that you wouldn't know who you are outside of that, because you've never been outside of that. Yeah. I loved this theme. I even wrote a book on the topic once I recognized that really the essence, bar any other considerations, the essence of coaching is being a good listener. And when I recognized that, I wrote a book on the topic. Until you disappear. All of the ego and everything that defines you as a personality in the world, when all of that disappears and all that's present is the listening, that's when people start changing. You don't have to think up suggestions or reason out ways. If you hear them thoroughly, they will change for the better.
I'm going to restate what you just said using IFS terminology, because that's the training that I have had now since 2019. That's so deeply ingrained in me now for the last 4+ years that I've been getting this training. When someone shows up as their true authentic self and lends you their energy by giving you their attention, their full attention, as their true authentic self with no agenda in the space, they activate the ability for the other to access their own true authentic self. And it's that authentic self that has access to qualities and resources that are needed to find the answers to and solve the problems for any puzzle or any problem.
That's right.
As well as to access creativity. Yeah, if you, and you do such a fine job of this, when I'm in conversation with you, if I'm struggling with something or I'm exploring the possibilities and you listen actively as you do, like you reflect back to me, you ask permission to give ideas and then you share ideas with me, or you ask permission to give perspective and then you share perspective. By the way, that's an important piece too that carries over from coaching into my relationships, is asking permission.
Right.
Before I do anything to fix or help another person. Mm-hmm. No fixing, of course, but the help would come by, I recognize in my personal life, whether it's my kids, my grandkids, my wife, anybody in my personal life, that they've got deeply built right within them the same resources that I do. It's just that sometimes they may not know, just as sometimes I don't know, that I forget. I forget that I have those resources. And sometimes it takes someone else that can bring their own fully resourced self into my life for a couple of minutes and lend that to me so that I can remember and then begin to access my own resources. That's why someone listening will yield access to those resources. And now I know exactly what I need to do. And I have the motivation and the inspiration to do. Good stuff, man. That's great stuff. So we've been talking about relationships, personal life and relationships. How have your relationships, let me say it this way, how has being a coach impacted how you relate to other people?
That's a huge question. So how do I relate how does it impact how I relate to people outside of coaching?
Exactly. I want to restate it just a little bit. How has that impacted who you are being in relationship with others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, a couple of observations. I don't even know how this all adds up, frankly, but I know that I used to feel the need to assert myself more, to make an impression, to have a voice, the sort of thing. Like I would walk into a party and I would want to make sure everybody knew I was there. Like I would give a big hello to the whole room, or I'd go around and touch everybody. I don't do that anymore. I'm perfectly fine to be taking it all in. I don't have to claim some recognition or attention or like I used to. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing I know. And like I say, I don't know why that is exactly. I could speculate, but that is a big change. And other people in my life who've been in my life before coaching and since have noticed this about me. So that's one thing. Another thing is that and maybe this is closely related, like I'm a lot more generous. It starts with not being suspicious even. There's a generosity in not being suspicious of everybody that walks up, like a generosity of spirit, welcome to my space, as opposed to who the heck you are. I know that I give more tithing to organizations than I used to as well. And in that party, that hypothetical party that I was talking about, I'm going to be really genuinely interested in a way that before I wanted to have people interested in me, and now I'm more interested in in hearing them. And that's all very different than it was before coaching.
The word humility is coming to mind.
Mm.
It sounds like you have gained humility as a coach that you maybe didn't have or didn't have access to prior to coaching.
And I think that now that you use that word, it reminds me of another dimension of this change in me, is that I get that other people need me. And so it makes me I have more humility when I need others. Like, because I recognize we need each other. We're never alone. We are social creatures and we need each other. And this, I guess this goes in alignment with everything I've been saying so far about these changes in me. Is before I was trying to show that I was a rugged individualist. I can do it alone. I know what I'm doing. And now I'm like, no, I have no idea what I'm doing. I need friendship. I need support. I need help. And I'm clear about that. So that's a big change.
One of my favorite definitions of the word humility is knowing who you are. I like that so much because it's when I don't know who I am that I strive so hard to find it.
That's right.
And prove it. If I don't know who I am, then it feels like I have a responsibility to figure that out or to just generate it, which is another definition of ego or survival mechanism.
That's right.
I'm going to get real busy designing who it is I believe I need to show up in the world as. And then I'm going to go out and prove it and test it and prove it and test it and prove it and test it. And now life becomes a whole series of seeking approval and becoming validated, which, come to find out, is just a reflection of my infancy and my young childhood. It is being so unsure of myself and getting the wrong information that who I was really bad, wrong, and not enough, led to creating a whole lifetime of identity crisis where I just decided for myself, I think I know who I am, and it's not very good. So whoever this is, I need to make sure I hide that from the world and then present to the world what would be far more acceptable. So when you talk about walking into a room and with a loud hello or a noticeable hello that everybody knows you're in the room and you touch everybody, just make sure what I was thinking of is the need for validation.
Yeah.
Sure that people know that I exist, because maybe if they don't know I exist, maybe I don't. Or if I don't exist as this that I'm showing them, that they might just figure out that I exist as the person I'm trying to hide. And so all of that is around humility. What a relief to find out who I really am.
Yeah, and another way to say it is, that makes sense to me. I want to project this on you, but is I just feel like I'm much more porous. Like things can come in and go out of me. It doesn't stick to me as much because I don't have some persona that I've got to defend and keep. I know that I change with each client and each need and each context. And so I feel like things can go right through my ego and come out the other side. I'm porous. That's the way I think about it.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the relationships that I have in my life that require interaction on a regular basis. So my wife.
Yes.
And then one or two of my siblings, all three of my children, occasionally my grandchildren, some friends that go back 25, 30 years or more. And how those relationships have changed and how I relate to who I'm being now that I'm a coach and the longer that I'm a coach compared to who I was being previously. I think it almost boils down to this. Who I was being previously was afraid and self-focused. Some combination of that most of the time. Relationships with others really did. I would have hated to admit it at the time. Can't come down to transactions. What's in it for me? What's in this relationship for me? And if you're not listening to me, if you're not doing what I want you to do, if you're not living the way I want you to live, and if you don't think of me the way that I want you to think of me, I'll continue to invest only until I finally get you to think of me as I want you to, or I finally just give up realizing that you're not going to. So that has shifted dramatically. And what I'm really interested now in is connection. I believe that one of the main reasons that I love being a coach is that it requires that I stay in the game of personal development. Personal development attracted me to coaching in the first place. Once I realized that's what coaching was. Coaching was a racket. I thought it was consulting. I thought it was for people that didn't know how to live their lives, so they told other people how to do it. And what I realize now is that coaching is, for the most part, for people that are coaches and have been coaches for a while and can stay with it for years and years, as you and I have, and many people that I have such high respect for have, is the willingness to continue to do their own work. And I said this in earlier episodes as well. The whole key to personal transformation is the willingness to change, the willingness to do your own work, the willingness and the ability to go inside. And so I continuously expose myself to more and more training, which, I mean, I need to do that to be able to stay skilled and sharp as a coach. But mostly I do that because it benefits me personally. It helps me to connect and relate to people better, much better. This is not an exaggeration. I used to say this out loud, and it was absolutely true that I hated people. Now this was, it's been some time. It's been 30, 35, 40 years. I'm 68 years old now, but that's who I was. And over time, once I was introduced to personal development, starting when I got sober in 1982, over time, I have been surprised by people. I've been surprised. Oh, that's not a bad person. This is someone who's capable of actually connection and love, and who I like and respect. What a surprise. I didn't know there were people like that in the world. And that gradient, as I've continued to travel down that road, I somewhere along the lines, I flipped from hating people to loving people as a default. And they have to work really hard for me not to like them. I don't hate anybody, but folks, their parts and my parts have to clash pretty badly for me not to like them. It's a big change. And I think that I can thank the healing that I've done, much of it thanks to coaching and internal family systems.
Awesome.
It's a better way to live.
It is. As you were describing that, this is totally a parenthesis. This isn't the main subject, but I was thinking, as you were describing, like that world in which you're on your own, you got to kill what you're going to eat. The others could take your food or your client, and you got to stand. That is the picture that the Enlightenment philosophers painted of the state of nature. Thomas Hobbes, Jacques Rousseau, these kind of people. And it was reading their writings that our forefathers wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So they were in the mindset, like, it's a dangerous world out there, when they wrote those foundational documents. For a topic for another podcast.
Fascinating. So we're going to borrow from philosopher Dr. Martin Kettlehut.
That's right.
Bring that into some coaching conversations. I think that's
great. And I'm happy to return to that. I talk a lot about it in the book that I'm writing, by the way, on leadership. But the reason I brought it up now is because I think that this coaching, the advent of coaching and the burgeoning of it as an industry is a sign to me that we're leaving behind that enlightenment. We're entering a new era of what it is to be human. And coaching is just a symptom of that. I would put that out there.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Remember, you and I are both old enough to remember the big movement as we recognize and acknowledge that the age of Aquarius was upon us. I wasn't sure, maybe I'm still not sure what that meant, but there's something about forecasting where we are and what that means for our future that gets me excited.
Yeah. I think, by the way, we don't need to dwell on this either, but The age of Aquarius, we're still at the dawning. It's going to take a couple hundred years to dawn, the age of Aquarius. So we're still at the dawn.
What does it even mean, the age of Aquarius? I remember the song, The Dawning of the Age of Aquarius. What does that even mean?
I think just to stick to the kind of words that we're using here, I think it's going to be and this is what astrologers and astronomers will also tell you, there will be more of this kind of, instead of fear in our relationships, we will have connection. That is part of what the Aquarian conspiracy, if you read F. Scott Peck, that's what he says it's coming.
Interesting. A conspiracy
for the betterment of humanity, yeah.
Who's doing the conspiring?
Humanity.
Humanity is conspiring to have peace and connection.
Yes, exactly. Nobody's excluded. We're all in on that.
I love that. And it ties in with a dawning philosophy for myself too, which is that we all, at our core, as true, authentic selves, who we truly actually are connected. Mm-hmm. And we share in common a passion and a purpose, which, while it's each unique for each of us, serves a common purpose. Mm-hmm. And so the dawning of connection and peace in the world may be what's at the core of our true purpose and passion, if we can just discover it. And my belief is, my philosophy with coaching is that if I can help people become more and more of who they are by just shedding who they're afraid they are or think they have to be, that they too will discover their own passion and purpose and contribute to that greater good.
Exactly right. So that's what I'm just recognizing here, is that coaching plays a very important role in this new age that's coming on. By the way, the sort of transition period is called Kali Yuga, which means the dark age.
I see.
So you have to go through, like in the Middle Ages, they went through a dark age in order to then have a renaissance.
I see.
We're in the Kali Yuga right now of the Aquarian time.
Kali Yuga, the dark time? Is that what you said? The dark?
Yeah, the dark age.
And that marks the dawning of this new age.
If you read about the goddess Kali, you'll understand why it's dark.
You are so interesting and intelligent and amazing in all the research that you've done and what you understand. And I have parts of me that feel so not challenged or threatened by you, but just, I'm not even the same league with you when it comes to.
Oh, shush.
No, I'm talking about, I don't mean to be minimizing me or puffing you up. I'm just saying, I just love hearing you talk about this stuff. And I'm so grateful that you've done the work and done the research and have studied all of this, because you can bring it into practical application. The things that you're talking about here, you're not just saying, oh, listen to all the fluff that I've got and look how smart I am. You're saying this is relevant. This information that I have, this knowledge that I've accumulated over the years of academia and continued study, have practical application to our lives today. I love and really appreciate that about you, Marty.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. That last piece, the understanding of the Aquarian and the Kali Yuga and all of that I attribute to not academic knowledge, but my spiritual path.
I see. Yes. Yeah.
That's where I learned that.
We're out of time.
Oh,
so let's go ahead and wrap up this session. Thanks for joining me again for another episode of Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching.
And maybe in a future episode on this general topic, we could look at building the business itself. Because that's a major part of the life of a coach, is building the business itself. So we could do that in a future episode.
I will make a note of it so that when we consider the next episode, if nothing else more pressing has come up, we can just dive into that next.
Thank you.
Martin, thank you. Take care.
That concludes another episode of Not Your Typical Leadership Coaching. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights to fuel your leadership journey.
Remember, true leadership is not about you. It's about empowering others.
Take your insights to heart and cultivate a leadership mindset that will transform you from within.
Thank you for joining us on this quest to leadership excellence. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for our upcoming episodes where we delve deeper into the art of leadership.
Until next time, remember that you have the power to lead with confidence and compassion from the inside out.